Good morning, kindergarten, first grade. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2020, and this is our Bible story for the week. Our book is called God Wants Us to Follow Him, and inside our story is called A Promise in the Stars. Let's go ahead and open up to that page. A Promise in the Stars. But before we begin, let's say good morning to all of our friends on the rug today. Good morning, Abel and Ella. Hello, Junie. Hi, Jonas. Good morning to Scott and Lawson. Hello, Ashley and Riley. Good morning there, Callie and Zoe. Good morning, Layla, Sophie. Good morning, Reagan and Elijah. So glad to have all my friends here with me on the rug today. Makes me feel a little less lonely, like I'm actually reading to you. A Promise in the Stars. God had blessed Abram, and he had become a very rich man. Abram was living in a new home in a new land. There were all kinds of trees and vines that provided lots of delicious food for Abram, Sarai, and all their servants. Abram also had many animals: donkeys, camels, cows, goats, and sheep. Those animals were having babies and making Abram even richer. But as Abram walked through his camp, he became very sad. As he looked at his animals, he saw they were having babies. The mama goat had a little kid. The mama sheep had a little lamb. Mama cow had a little calf. Abram's servants had children too, but Abram and Sarai didn't have a child of their own, and that made him very, very sad. Abram remembered that God had promised to bless him, and God had blessed Abram in many different ways. But God, Sarai and I still don't have any children, Abram told God one night. God knew how Abram and Sarai felt, so God spoke to Abram to encourage him. Don't be afraid. I haven't forgotten about you, God told Abram. Look up at the stars in the sky. Can you count all the stars? There were millions of stars in the nighttime sky. Abram could never count that many stars. There are too many stars for you to count, Abram, God explained, just like there are too many stars to count. Someday, you will have so many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren that you will never be able to count how many people are in your family. That seems impossible, God, Abram replied. But I love you, and I will trust you. Abram and Sarai waited and waited to have a baby. Abram and Sarai got older and older, and they still waited for a baby. They believed that God would keep his promise, but still there was no baby for them to care for and love. One day, Abram sat outside his tent thinking about God's special promise to have many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He was 99 years old, and he thought it would be impossible to have a child now that he and Sarai were so old. God spoke to Abram again. I haven't forgot about you or my promise to you, God told Abram. I promise you that next year at this time, Sarai will have a baby. I want you to call him Isaac. And from now on, your name will be Abraham, because you will be the father of many. And Sarai will be known as Sarah, because some of her grandchildren will be kings someday. One day, Abraham was sitting outside his tent. Maybe he was wondering how God would keep his promise for Sarah and him to have children and grandchildren. As Abraham sat there, he suddenly realized that 3 men were standing near his tent. Come and rest in the shade with me, Abraham offered. I'll have my servants bring you some water to drink and fix some food for you to eat. Quickly, Sarah and the servants baked some bread. They filled pitchers with cool, fresh water, and they even roasted some meat to serve to their guests. While they were eating, one of the guests asked Abraham, Where is Sarah, your wife? Well, she is in the tent, Abraham answered. Then one of the guests said, "About this time next year, she will have a son." From inside the tent, Sarah heard what the guest had said. She laughed when she heard that. "That's funny. Abraham and I are too old to have a baby boy now." One of the guests asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Does she think it's impossible for her to have a baby?" Remember, nothing is impossible for God to do. Abraham and Sarah knew that these guests must be angels, or maybe even God. Sarah and Abraham knew that God hadn't forgotten about them and that he would keep his promises to them. Sometimes it's hard to wait for good things because we want to have them right away. But sometimes we have to wait. While we wait, it's important to remember that God wants us to trust him, even while we're waiting for a promise to come true. The Lord will do what he says. Isaiah 38:7. Can you read that verse with me again, boys and girls? Say, the Lord. The Lord will do what he says. Isaiah 38:7. Just like this little picture of this boy at his birthday party, you know what it's like to wait for your birthday to come. You know it's getting near, and it's so hard to wait and be patient because you're so excited. That's how we have to be too in our lives. Sometimes we might have to wait for something good to happen, or we might have to wait for God to work in our lives or answer a prayer. And while we're waiting for his goodness to be shown or the gift that we have asked him to give us, let us all be patient. Let's wait on the Lord. He is good. He always keeps his promises, and he will do what he says. I love you, boys and girls. Have a great day.